On December 4, 1872, sailors crossing the Atlantic noticed a brigantine moving strangely through the rough water. Its sails were unevenly set, its course was erratic, and no one appeared to be controlling the wheel. The vessel was the Mary Celeste, an American merchant ship that should have been approaching the Italian port of Genoa. When a boarding party climbed onto its deck, they found no captain, no sailors, and no passengers. The ship's only lifeboat was missing, but much of its cargo and provisions remained aboard. Personal belongings were still inside the cabins, and there was no obvious evidence of a violent struggle. 10 people had sailed from New York aboard the Mary Celeste, including a captain, his family, and 7 crewmen. None of them was ever seen or heard from again. Their disappearance inspired stories about piracy, murder, sea monsters, explosions, and supernatural forces. Yet the real mystery is not simply where they went, but why an experienced captain abandoned a ship that remained capable of sailing. The vessel was built at Spencer's Island in Nova Scotia and launched in 1861 under the name Amazon. It was a brigantine designed to transport commercial cargo across the Atlantic and between busy trading ports. Its early career included accidents, changes of ownership, and the death of its first captain after an illness. In 1867, the Amazon ran aground near Cape Breton Island and suffered serious damage. Salvagers recovered the vessel, and it was eventually sold to American owners who repaired it. The ship was registered in the United States and renamed the Mary Celeste in 1869. A major rebuilding project in 1872 enlarged the vessel and prepared it for further ocean voyages. Although later legends describe the ship as cursed, accidents and ownership changes were common in 19th century maritime commerce. Nothing in the Mary Celeste's documented history suggested that it was destined to become the world's most famous ghost ship. That reputation began only after its final departure from New York, with Captain Benjamin Briggs in command. Benjamin Briggs was an experienced American seaman from a family deeply connected with the maritime trade. He was respected as a cautious captain and was not known for reckless decisions or violent behavior. Briggs invested money in the Mary Celeste and had a personal interest in completing its voyages safely. His wife, Sarah Elizabeth Briggs, accompanied him on the journey to Italy. Their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda, also traveled aboard the ship. The couple left their school-aged son, Arthur, with relatives in Massachusetts. 7 sailors completed the crew, including experienced officers and several German seamen with respectable records. Briggs had selected his men carefully because he was bringing his wife and young daughter across the Atlantic. No reliable evidence indicates serious conflict among the people who boarded the Mary Celeste. When the ship disappeared beyond the horizon, everyone expected an ordinary commercial voyage rather than a mystery that would endure for generations. The Mary Celeste carried 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol intended for commercial use in Genoa. The cargo was valuable, but potentially dangerous because leaking alcohol could release highly flammable vapor into the hold. The ship left its New York pier in early November, but waited near Staten Island for improved weather. On November 7, 1872, conditions allowed Briggs to begin the Atlantic crossing. The Mary Celeste soon encountered periods of strong winds and rough seas. Entries preserved from its log indicate that the voyage became especially difficult as the ship approached the Azores. Briggs continued west of his expected position longer than he may have realized. Problems with navigation, weather, cargo, or equipment may have gradually increased the captain's concerns. The final surviving log entry was recorded on the morning of November 25 near Santa Maria Island in the Azores. After that entry, the written voice of the Mary Celeste suddenly fell silent. Another merchant brigantine named the Dei Gracia had departed New York 8 days after the Mary Celeste. It was commanded by Captain David Morehouse and was also sailing toward Gibraltar and the Mediterranean. On December 4th, the Dei Gracia was approximately midway between the Azores and Portugal when its crew spotted a distant vessel. The unknown ship moved unsteadily and appeared to be sailing without proper control. Some sails were damaged or missing, while others remained raised in an irregular arrangement. Morehouse's crew watched for signs of life, but saw no one standing on the deck. They signaled the vessel and received no response. As the 2 ships moved closer, the sailors recognized the name Mary Celeste on the other vessel's stern. Morehouse ordered First Mate Oliver DeVoe and Second Mate John Wright to cross the water in a small boat. The 2 men climbed aboard without knowing whether they would find injured sailors, criminals, bodies, or nobody at all. DeVoe and Wright searched the deck, cabins, storage spaces, and other accessible areas of the Mary Celeste. They found the vessel completely deserted. The ship's lifeboat was gone, suggesting that Briggs and the others had deliberately left the vessel. Much of the rigging was damaged, and ropes were hanging loosely over the sides. The ship's compass housing had shifted from its position, and its glass cover was broken. Water had entered the cabins through doorways and skylights, leaving the interior wet and disordered. The captain's navigational instruments and most of the ship's official papers were missing. Their absence supports the possibility that Briggs took them when he entered the lifeboat. However, clothing and many other personal possessions remained inside the cabins. The scene looked less like a planned disappearance than a hurried evacuation made under uncertain and frightening conditions. Approximately 3.5 feet of water had accumulated in the ship's hold. This amount was concerning, but not enough to place a vessel of the Mary Celeste's size in immediate danger of sinking. One of the ship's pumps had been taken apart, possibly because the crew had been attempting to repair it. A makeshift sounding rod used to measure water in the hold was found on the deck. The main cargo hatch was secured, although 2 smaller hatches were found open with their covers nearby. The ship still carried sufficient food and drinking water for an extended voyage. Most of the barrels of alcohol remained in place and appeared undisturbed. No confirmed bodies, bullet holes, major bloodstains, or clear signs of combat were discovered. The vessel was damaged but still seaworthy enough for the Dei Gracia's sailors to navigate it to Gibraltar. Every clue seemed to suggest danger, yet none explained why all 10 people had chosen the vulnerable lifeboat over the larger ship. The last log entry placed the Mary Celeste within sight of Santa Maria Island on November 25th. The Dei Gracia found the abandoned vessel hundreds of miles farther east, approximately 10 days later. Historical weather data suggests that the Mary Celeste could have traveled that distance without anyone steering it. Wind and ocean currents may have carried the ship along a course that made it appear to sail by itself. The crew probably abandoned it near the Azores shortly after the final entry was recorded. Being within sight of land could have made evacuation seem safer than it would have appeared in the open Atlantic. Briggs may have expected to remain connected to the Mary Celeste with a rope while assessing the danger. If that rope broke, the larger vessel could have moved rapidly away from the overloaded lifeboat. The people in the small boat would then have faced strong winds, waves, exposure, and limited supplies. Because neither the boat nor its occupants were ever found, the ocean erased the final stage of their journey. Captain Morehouse divided his crew and ordered several men to sail the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar. Bringing the damaged vessel into port was difficult and exposed the sailors to considerable danger. Under maritime law, they could claim a financial reward for saving the abandoned ship and its cargo. A salvage hearing opened in Gibraltar to determine the circumstances of the recovery and the payment they deserved. Attorney General Frederick Solly Flood became convinced that the disappearance might involve a crime. Inspectors examined marks on the bow, stains on a rail, damage to the vessel, and the captain's sword. Some marks were initially interpreted as possible evidence of violence or deliberate damage. Later analysis failed to establish that the stains were human blood or that the ship had been attacked. The investigation produced suspicion, but no convincing proof of murder, mutiny, piracy, or fraud. The court eventually released the vessel, although the Dei Gracia's crew received a smaller salvage award than many observers expected. One early theory claimed that the crew drank the ship's alcohol, became violent, and murdered Captain Briggs and his family. However, the cargo contained industrial alcohol that would have been dangerous to drink. The sailors had respectable records, and no reliable evidence indicates that they planned a mutiny. The lack of bodies, weapons, major bloodstains, or signs of prolonged fighting further weakens the theory. Another explanation accused the Dei Gracia's crew of killing everyone aboard the Mary Celeste to claim salvage money. Yet the Dei Gracia was slower, left New York later, and had no known opportunity to arrange such an attack. Pirates were also proposed, but valuable cargo and personal possessions remained aboard the ship. Criminals would have gained little by taking 10 prisoners while leaving a valuable vessel behind. Insurance fraud theories similarly require a complicated conspiracy unsupported by surviving documents. Human wrongdoing cannot be completely excluded, but the physical evidence offers no persuasive reconstruction of such a crime. When the cargo was unloaded, 9 of the 1,701 barrels were found empty. Those barrels were reportedly made from porous red oak rather than the less permeable white oak used for most of the shipment. Alcohol may have escaped from them and filled parts of the hold with strong vapor. Briggs and his crew might have heard a violent noise or noticed fumes that made them fear an explosion. An alcohol vapor event can produce pressure or a frightening burst without necessarily leaving obvious burn damage. Some experiments have demonstrated how vapor could create an explosive sound while causing little visible destruction. A cautious captain traveling with his family might have ordered everyone into the lifeboat until the danger passed. However, the boarding party found the main cargo hatch secured and did not report a powerful smell of alcohol. There was also no confirmed evidence that an explosion had actually occurred aboard the ship. Leaking barrels may have contributed to Briggs's fear, but they cannot by themselves explain every detail of the abandonment. The Mary Celeste had endured strong winds and difficult seas during the days before its crew disappeared. A waterspout could have struck nearby, frightened the people aboard, or caused water to enter the vessel. A seaquake has also been proposed because underwater seismic activity can produce violent sounds and unusual movements. Neither theory is supported by direct evidence from the ship's final recorded position. A giant wave might have damaged the rigging and convinced Briggs that the vessel was becoming uncontrollable. Yet the surviving condition of the ship does not suggest that it had experienced a completely catastrophic storm. Stories about giant squid attacks and sea monsters appeared because the absence of facts encouraged imaginative explanations. There were no marks demonstrating that a large creature attacked the vessel or carried away its occupants. Supernatural theories involving ghosts, curses, and unexplained forces offer drama but cannot be tested against the evidence. The most credible explanation probably involves several ordinary dangers combining at the worst possible moment. Modern investigators have proposed that problems with the ship's pumps played a crucial role in Briggs's decision. The Mary Celeste had carried coal on an earlier voyage and had recently undergone extensive rebuilding. Coal dust and construction debris may have clogged the pumps or made them difficult to operate. Because the hold was tightly packed with barrels, the crew could not easily inspect the bottom of the vessel. If the pumps failed, Briggs may have been unable to determine how quickly water was entering the hull. A damaged or clogged sounding pipe could also have produced an inaccurate measurement of the water level. Investigators have suggested that an unreliable chronometer caused Briggs to misjudge the ship's position by a considerable distance. After days of rough weather, delayed landfall may have increased his uncertainty about the vessel's safety. When Santa Maria finally appeared, the combination of land nearby, a faulty pump, rising water, and possible cargo fumes may have triggered an evacuation. From Briggs's perspective, temporarily leaving the ship could have seemed like a rational response to information that later proved misleading. Briggs probably did not intend to abandon the Mary Celeste permanently. The missing lifeboat may have been attached to the ship by a long rope while the crew waited for conditions to improve. 10 people crowded into the small boat would have made it unstable and difficult to control. Strong wind could have suddenly filled the Mary Celeste's remaining sails and pulled the larger vessel forward. If the connecting rope snapped or was released, the ship would have moved beyond the reach of the lifeboat. Briggs and his crew might have rowed desperately without being able to catch it. A sudden wave could then have overturned the boat, or currents could have carried it away from Santa Maria. Meanwhile, the Mary Celeste continued eastward under partial sail until the Dei Gratia found it. This scenario explains the missing boat, absent instruments, lack of violence, and survival of the ship. It remains only a reconstruction, but it requires fewer unsupported assumptions than theories of murder, piracy, or supernatural intervention. After the investigation, the Mary Celeste returned to commercial service under several different owners. In 1885, a later captain deliberately wrecked it near Haiti during an unsuccessful insurance fraud. By then, the unexplained disappearance of the 1872 crew had already become part of maritime folklore. Arthur Conan Doyle's 1884 fictional story changed names, invented events, and introduced details later mistaken for historical facts. Retellings added an untouched meal, warm drinks, smoking pipes, and other clues that were never documented by the boarding party. These inventions transformed a difficult maritime accident into the image of a ship whose occupants vanished in a single supernatural moment. The available evidence instead suggests that Captain Briggs faced a danger he believed was serious enough to justify a temporary evacuation. Do you believe a damaged pump and rough weather caused the tragedy, or does another explanation better fit the abandoned ship? Share your theory in the comments and send this video to someone fascinated by mysteries of the sea. Subscribe and turn on notifications as we continue investigating the unexplained events that history left drifting in darkness.